Hello and welcome to InRetroSpect. I am Daniel Frost, and today I am joined by my usual globe-trotting, pistol-wielding, puzzle-solving compatriots, Chris Darby.
I prefer doorknobs.
Pete Willington.
Too late for abortions now.
And Sam Turner.
Oh, Pierre, you litterbug.
Now, you might remember a few months ago, we brought you a month of special podcasts that took your ears on a journey through the world of Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear. We called it InRetroSolid. Well, this month, once again, the usual collection of podcasts from the InRetroSpect crew are off for a well-earned summer break. But fear not, as we will be continuing our exploration in some of the gaming franchises which have defined the way we play games today. So ready your ears, as for the next 30 days, Chris, Pete, Sam and myself will be traversing the spike pits, broken ledges and ancient relics of Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. Since somersaulting her way onto the gaming scene, the Tomb Raider franchise has become one of the most iconic and successful series in the world. Selling over 35 million copies worldwide, the 9 games that make up the life of Lara Croft have spanned nearly 2 decades and 3 generations of gaming hardware. First developed by Core Design, Crystal Dynamics has recently taken over the mantle of taking the most successful gaming heroine in the world through a brand new reboot. We thought now is a better time than ever to take a look back at the brazen beauty that is Lara Croft. As with the previous special, there is not much that you will have to do to join in with this month of dedicated shows. Just download or listen on the website and you'll find out where to go or what to do to get hold of the next episode. But I must warn you that there may well be the odd spoiler or two. Over the coming weeks, Pete, Sam and Chris and myself will grapple and slide our way through the life of the English archaeologist and take a unique glance on the universe. From the impact on popular culture, to the spine of puzzles in each and every game, then on to how the games have made it from screen to page and then back onto the screen. Then we'll all come back together in 4 weeks' time to see where the games are going and how it has inspired a whole generation. We won't leave any stone unturned as we bring you InRetroSpect. Launched in 1996, the original Tomb Raider was labelled as a revolution in 3D gaming, and on release garnered both critical and commercial success. In doing so, Lara Croft became a global star whose image could be found in publications across the world, films, comics and novels following. Some, it was the first time they had seen a female heroine take on the world of a male-dominated industry. So I'd like to start off in InRetroSpect by finding out at which point did you have your first experience with Miss Croft, Chris?
My first experience with Miss Croft was in 1996. It was actually coincidentally, it was my first sort of run-in with the PlayStation, actually. I wasn't allowed a console as a child, so I'd only kind of get to play on games, like on consoles, when I went round to my mates' houses. And I was round at my friend Kevin's house, and we'd spend our days kind of playing in the treehouse outside and stuff. And then later we just go inside, and his older brothers had got like a PlayStation and things, and there'd be games there. And I remember him putting on this game. I played 2 games there for the first time, Tomb Raider and Tekken. But Tomb Raider was the one that really stuck with me. And I always remember being sat there and watching this person kind of explore the mountain caves and these bats flying towards you. And I just remember this really eerie sense of the unknown here. And it kind of unnerved me. That with the music as well, it really, really unnerved me. But it always kind of stayed with me, just that one level, just playing that first level around the mountain caves. And I remember getting lost in it. I mean, we only played that one level, but we played it for hours. We just didn't know what to do, really. We were just running around, not knowing which direction to go. But we didn't really care. And that was my kind of first run in with Lara Croft. And then some years kind of passed, and I still hadn't got a console. And I asked for Christmas if I could get Tomb Raider free on PC. And I did get it. Unfortunately, typical with my luck with PCs, the game was just ridiculously slow. I mean, it took her like 5 minutes to jump in the air and hit the ground. So I remember going through India. I mean, I didn't go any further really with Tomb Raider 3 for some years until we got a better computer, because it took me about 2 days to get through India. But no, Tomb Raider was one of these weird things at school. No one really talked. I only had like, there were only 2 of my mates really played it. And this was kind of primary school going on high school. And I remember, because I'd also got like an Explorer cheat cartridge. And I kind of, as we all know, over these cheat cartridges, they never work completely. You type in this garbled bit of code, and then you basically just glitch the game. And I remember my mate Gray coming into school one day with this code. He says, "Chris, I've got the Nude Raider patch." I was like, "You what?" And he showed me, and I kid you not, about 3 sheets of A4 paper lined of just code. It looked like the Matrix, with the screen of just code. And he like painstakingly copied it out on the internet, expecting me to type this in. Of course, I didn't do that at all. Ridiculous. But that was the only real sort of interest with Tomb Raider. And I remember my next door neighbour, Kate, she was laughing because I told my mother that Tomb Raider, to convince my mother that Tomb Raider was the game for me, I said it was all about archaeology.
Yeah.
And my friend Kate, she just looked at it and just saw this like buxom, chested sort of woman on the front. She said, "Yeah, whatever, Chris." And she still jokes about that to this day, really. The fact that I managed to convince my mother to buy this game under the pretense that it was about archaeology. When, to be honest, actually quite a lot of it is. So I love Tomb Raider. It's a game series that I hold very dear to my heart, and it's always been there from 1996 as a child playing my mate Kevin. It's kind of something that's just kind of cropped up for me, really, as a series. But that was my first kind of foray into it, really.
I mean, Chris, you came into it right at the start, and that was kind of your first experience. I mean, for me, I only came into it very recently, and I played Legend. I mean, you guys, Sam, were you there right at the start as well, or have you just more recently discovered the charms of Lara Croft?
Well, I definitely never played, well, I actually still haven't essentially ever played the first ever Tomb Raider game. Around at that point, it was my brother's console, the PlayStation. So I'm definitely not late to the Lara party, but what I did play, the first Tomb Raider game that I did play was Tomb Raider 2. And I actually owned the game on 2 different platforms. I remember owning the huge box when PC games came in huge, cumbersome cardboard boxes with huge sort of cover art on the front, and there was this Tomb Raider 2, and I was really interested in it. But then I also owned it on the PlayStation, and on the PlayStation it came in an equally huge sort of box. I think it was about 3 or 4 CDs. So for some reason, that even just the size and the glory of the box kind of made me interested in this game. And Chris tapped on an interesting point that, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, that most of my involvement with the game came from a juvenile sort of interest. The fact that it was sort of the first female heroine that I'd ever seen in a game that I could control at my own will. But then after a while, after playing Tomb Raider 2 for a long time, and I did play for a long time because it's a game that lives by quite a lot of old sort of standards, as I would call them. There's not much in the way of checkpointing where you need to go. There's not much in the way of narrative or really sort of in-depth cutscene or character development like there is in games today. So a lot of it was just exploration and really just doing the same two areas over and over again, because that's all I could sort of figure out what to do, because really it was quite a grown-up game, but I had quite a juvenile interest in it. So I found them initially very, very difficult games to get on with. I found Lara quite a difficult character to sort of wield. She wasn't the stocky sort of limited movement figure that I was used to. Enemies would pop out and I would panic and just jump off ledges in Venice and I'll be back in the water. And that, for me, kind of was a little bit unsettling in terms of a computer game experience. And then it wasn't until years and years later that I started actually playing Tomb Raider and Lara Croft games again. But that was my first sort of playing with Lara in the Tomb Raider games anyway.
It was about 98 or probably 99 by the time that I had my first voyeuristic experience with Lara. My friend actually played the game. She was called Emma Avis, and she lived a couple of houses down the road from me. And our family's been like lifelong friends. They just got a new computer, and I just found out that she was playing a new video game. And I was quite into video games at the time. And Emma was this really cool, still is, this really cool girl. Like, she had a bike, and like none of the other girls wanted a bike, like, but she was cool. So she had this really awesome yellow bicycle, and she played video games, which I thought was really, really awesome. So it would have been about 98, 99, because she just got a new copy of Tomb Raider 3, and that's the first title that I saw. I watched her play it. I think we went through it and she completed it. I think we went back and played a bit of Tomb Raider 2 or something like that. And I'd later pick up Tomb Raider 2 like a few years later when it was cheap on PC. But, you know, like Chris, I had the same sort of problem in that my computer couldn't really handle it. And the only way that I could handle it was with this thing that I've never seen before and I'd never seen since, where I could make it run if I made the size of the screen to the size of like a postage stamp. Like, yeah. You could do that and it would run much, much better. So, like, the first time that I was, like, actively playing a game, and I didn't really play it for very long because obviously it was an awful way to play it. But, yeah, I was playing on something that was about, 3 inches by 3 inches wide on an old 16 megabytes of RAM computer. It wasn't until when I got my Dreamcast, about a year after it was not supported anymore by Sega, that I picked up Tomb Raider 4, The Last Revelation, which is one of the games that, a lot of fans don't like. My real sort of involvement with Lara Croft has been so patchy and so sort of stop-start. It really has been like an engine misfiring. Like I'd always wanted to get into them, but whether it was just the fact that Emma was too cool and too good at the video game to let me have a go, or my computer not being able to run it, or me picking up the worst version of the game, there's always been something kind of in the way. And so, yeah, like I'd never really got into them until about Tomb Raider Legend, I would say, which was PS2 and a few years ago. So, yeah, it's been a weird first start for me with sort of Lara Croft, and this series has really let me kind of go and actually explore a few of these games in a little bit more depth.
I think it's interesting that I think we've all kind of come in at different places. Although it's often probably a point that people would laugh at. I mean, Chris, you discussed the fact that your friend came up with the Nude Raider patch, and I think that was a large point because she was the main first real feminine hero for young boys. That was a big deal that they could have this buxom girl, and that a lot of people, their first experiences with Tomb Raider did come as a result of that. But did any of you guys have any of that, and it being a thing of it being a female character?
No, not at all. Because, as I say, my first experience was with a girl, like a girl playing it. And I've actually, it's good that you raised that, because I never made that association of this is Lara Croft and, oh, isn't this fun and fantastic that I can control a lady with my keyboard. I've never had that experience, because I was sat there watching, a gal pal play this game with this strong female character, and it never entered my mind that this was some sort of illicit thing that I could do, that I could control a woman, a digital avatar of a woman. It was just okay, well, she's the hero of the game, and she happens to be a girl. Like it's never been sexualized for me.
Sam, you came into a few games in. You're among friends here. It's fine to admit these things. We're all young once. Did that have any kind of impact on you when you were wanting to play the game?
A little bit. And I think you have to be very, very aware that in the back of the game developer's mind, they were very, very conscious that to a lot of people, it would be the main selling point. I mean, looking back over Lara's image and how she looks from game to game, there's been a lot of close attention even paid to her breast size, which I believe has increased and decreased throughout the 9 games. And for me, when I first played this game as a young guy, as I said at the start, I had a very juvenile interest in it, and it probably was all about Lara. But the thing about the character is that in a strange kind of way, she's almost asexual. You can never really imagine her doing anything other than going around exploring caves and digging up treasure. You can never really imagine that there's this other side to her. She's a character that's played very, very well, where I couldn't certainly imagine her doing anything other than being an archaeologist and the heroine that she is. And that totally desexualized the whole game for me. The fact that I just believed that she was this character that had nothing else on her mind other than relics, ancients, and saving the world, which is a testament really to core design and how they actually pitched the character beyond this kind of over-sexualized skin.
Her development history is very fascinating, actually. And I think I might have to take issue with that, Sam, with core design, because core design they've always created a dual Lara Croft, and they've kind of ended it now, but there was always 2 Lara Crofts running in tandem with one another. For those who don't know, the actual Lara Croft, she was originally envisaged by Toby Gard, who's a lead designer and animator, and originally Lara Croft was a burly man, kind of with a whip and a hat, and core design said, nah, it's a bit too Indiana Jones, mate, so let's go for something a bit different. So to make a lead character female was a really, really brave decision at that point in time. It was incredibly brave because, I mean, yes, there wasn't any out there, so you've got a niche market, but also it's a very gutsy thing to do because is anyone going to take to this? And originally they kind of did her as a kind of a militaristic sort of strong woman, kind of like Vasquez out of Aliens or something like that. And she was actually going to be originally called Laura Cruz, but they changed it to Lara Croft to kind of sell in America. And then they made her English because Americans like English accents. So they made her this English sort of person who kind of has this very well-established classy background. And with regards to her breast size, that was kind of Gard, when he was designing her, apparently he kind of slipped and he kind of increased her breast size by 150%. And he was about to change it when people there said, oh, no, it's okay, leave it as it is. which is just crazy. And
with a sly little giggle, as they say.
but like the fact of the matter is that what afterwards, Toby Gard, he actually left Core Design because he didn't like the way they were marketing Lara outside of it. And I've got to agree with Sam. The reason I've never had any sort of views about this with Lara Croft is because in the game she is androgynous, she's asexual, but outside of the game, the way they market her with all the advertising campaigns and things like that is very different to the kind of Lara Croft you get in the game. For example, it's only recently they've stopped doing it, a Lara Croft model that would go around and kind of market the game. There was always two different types of Lara Croft running with tandem, the one that was in the game and the one that existed outside of it, that kind of fed the sort of marketing that kind of spurred sort of young teenage boys to kind of want to buy the game.
That's a very good point. And it's really fascinating to see why the series has gone in certain ways with how it's portrayed Lara. And while she's not a sort of sexual character when you are playing as her, especially, I think she's still very much in tune with her sexuality, but she's not, all flirty and deliberately sexy for the first 3 games, let's say. Around about game 4 and 5, and then into Angel of Darkness, they do begin to play that up a little bit, and you do start to wonder, is this because Core was just getting really sick of it by this point and just was happy to run with any idea that was going on? I mean, if you remember, in Tomb Raider 4, you played as young Lara, and very, very young and lithe, and it's odd. It's really odd, because you can't really seem to get like a straight answer from anybody. I'd actually heard that breast design thing was an urban legend. Like, it seems like there's as much kind of mystery surrounding the character of Lara as there is, within some of the temples that she's exploring.
Well, that's funny, because that's what Gard says about her. Lara had mystery about her. He kind of wanted to create a character that wasn't a stereotypical bimbo dominatrix, to quote. He said that he wanted someone to have mystery. And I think the reason Lara Croft has had such resonance is because, to be honest, we know very little about her. And what we do know about her keeps constantly getting changed by the company. But kind of what kind of kicked her off her appeal, though, was it was 2 things. It was an article in the Financial Times which pictured early kind of shots of the game. And in Face magazine, she had there was an article about her, like in this fashion cultural magazine.
She was on the front cover, mate.
Yeah, she was. She was the virtual girl on the front cover, and she became an icon before the game even came out. And everyone knows, pretty much nearly everyone knows about Lara Croft, even if they haven't played the games. She's kind of become sort of abstracted from the Tomb Raider universe, and many people kind of tried to cash in on that. I think Timberland tried to get some advertising with her for her boots, and they kind of turned her down. Whereas in Tomb Raider 2, there was a solar company, the wetsuit company, they succeeded, so you get solar wetsuits in Tomb Raider 2. She's just this unstoppable kind of juggernaut, really, which is why they've kind of kept her along so long, I think, as well.
It is perhaps a symptom of the fact that there have been countless sequels that some of us have bumbled and fumbled in the dark of the Tomb Raider universe, entering at different points. So it was wise then that to help us through this first of the specials, we would all play the reimagined version of the very first game, brought to us by Crystal Dynamics' Tomb Raider Anniversary. Part homage, part remake, and part love letter to the original first outing for the agile archaeologist, Tomb Raider Anniversary brought the debut adventure of Lara Croft to the modern audience. Pete, what do you think Anniversary tells us about how the life of Lara began?
Anniversary attempts to inject additional layers of depth to the character of Lara that weren't initially there in the original outing. When Tomb Raider came out in 96, the portrayal of Lara is relatively straight. She's a heroine, she is an explorer, and she understands a bit about her sexuality. You get the feeling that this is a significant reboot for the franchise, that the developers wanted to bring extra meaning to her actions and what she did, and maybe start something new. Maybe that they wanted to wipe the slate clean and say, okay, this is the original Tomb Raider adventure, the Tomb Raider story, and we're going to retell it slightly, but it's gonna keep the core ideas. It's very much, and I don't know how much you guys know about comic books, but it's very much like the Ultimate series in Marvel. What Marvel did was they took the origins of, say, for example, Spider-Man, and then every issue they kind of did something that was very, very different, and they kind of wanted to see where that would go and what that would do to the series, and they kept those two storylines very, very different. Well, here they basically, as I say, they wipe the slate clean and they say, right, this is what you thought about Lara Croft. Well, that's not valid anymore. Tomb Raider Anniversary, this is like a retcon of everything you knew. This is who Lara Croft is. And in many ways, it succeeds. She does feel like a more full personality. She does have more time to reflect. She's much less talkative than I remember her being in the original outing. She's a lot less grunty and groany, and playing up some of the sound effects for, maybe a testosterone fueled effect. The conversations that she does have are much more to the point with the enemies that she faces. There's a lot less James Bond style banter, which is good. I think it's a bit more realism, and she certainly looks better. The realism goes hand in hand with the fact that this was the first Tomb Raider to be developed on a really good brand new engine for the current generation of consoles. But in other ways, it kind of falls flat, because the problem is that if you do have a character that's quite silent and you don't have these development scenes where you get to see bits of her character more, because ultimately Anniversary is still all about going through temples and tombs and shooting bad guys and pushing blocks. If you don't actually have these moments of drama, then you aren't really developing the character significantly. So when you get into dialogue, if you already have an image of who Lara is, then it kind of all falls flat, because it's very difficult to disassociate those two very separate Laras. It's the beginning of a slightly more dark Lara. If we take Angel of Darkness out of the equation, and I think pretty much everyone would like to, she's much darker than she was in her original 5 adventures. And though she's not a brooding, wrist-cutting stereotype, she does feel like she has to reflect on situations a little bit more. And I'm sure we'll come to it in a little bit, but there are very specific scenes. There are several of them that punctuate this general sort of narrative of movement and environment and puzzle solving that kind of peer into a Lara Croft that we never really thought was there.
I think you do make a good point, and I think a lot of what they try to do with Anniversary is try and add more depth to the character. And I think one thing they have done is you look at the difference between the huge scope of time between the two games, between the first one and Anniversary. And one of the big things that has happened in gaming in general is the graphical capability, and with that, the importance of using cutscenes. And the cutscenes that you get now can fit into movies, the level that they can reach. Whereas you look back at the originals, you couldn't get a lot of the emotion and nuances that you can now. And I think what with an Anniversary enabled them to do with a better engine, with the better graphics, that they are able to use these cutscenes. Because when you're not in a cutscene, generally the game tends to play the same all the way through. You jump and you fight, you look around, you see what's on the wall that you can hang on to, which strategically placed rectangle you can hang on to. I'll jump onto that. It's not until you get into the cutscenes that you generally tend to see a character rather than somebody who's moving around the screen necessarily.
Yes, and that's absolutely it, because there are other games out there that when you are moving through them, the character puts across who they are in their physicality. So, for example, there might be a moment in a game where there is an explosion, for example, and a character might shield their eyes, or they might make a quip or something like that. Like, the best example I can give you is something like a Duke Nukem 3D or a Duke Nukem Forever, where you understand that there is character behind, these virtual eyes that you are given into the world, because in first person, you are making these quips, you are doing these things, you are narrating your own adventure. That's what Duke does, and you understand that Duke is a character and not just a silent protagonist with no personality. Like, on the flip side of it, for example, something like Gordon Freeman in the Half-Life series, you don't really understand what his character's like. And that's the same here with Lara Croft. You don't really get who Lara is until the cutscenes. And the reason that Half-Life doesn't do cutscenes, or at least one of the reasons that it doesn't do cutscenes, is because when you are looking through the eyes of Freeman, you are building the character yourself. So if you were to then go into something where you were looking at them in the third person, or seeing how they react, that might be completely out of character for who it is that you've mentally built a picture of. And so I would argue that most of the cutscenes in Anniversary are absolutely not what I imagined Lara to be, and I think that that's why it's a little bit jarring.
I think also the one thing missing, as you say there, when, for example, the physical character doesn't really react to the environment around her. I'd like to ask Chris, as someone who played the first game, having played the first game and then played this revamp of it, how do the two compare in terms of the experience it's trying to portray to us?
Oh, it's very interesting. I've recently been playing them side by side. So I played the first level from Tomb Raider, then the first level from Tomb Raider Anniversary. And it's been really quite an interesting experience. Number one for me, really, is for Lara Croft, is kind of her impetus to go on this mission, as it were. In the first Tomb Raider back in '96, when she's talking to Natla on the computer screen, she's very much kind of fed by a desire for money and mingled with exploration. She's kind of almost like a mercenary sort of archaeologist.
What's a man got to do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Well, great. Though truth is, it ain't me that wants you.
Oh?
No, Miss Jacqueline Natla does, from Natla Technologies. You know, creator of all things bright and beautiful.
Seal it, Larson.
Ma'am.
Feast your eyes on this, Lara. How does that make your wallet rumble?
I'm sorry. I only play for sport.
Then you'll like a big park. Peru, vast mountain ranges to cover, sheer walls of ice, rocky crags, savage winds, and there's this little trinket. An age-old artifact of mystical power is buried in the unfound tomb of Qualapec. That's my interest. You could leave tomorrow. Are you busy tomorrow?
In Tomb Raider Anniversary, they add this bit where it's a desire to complete what was unfinished with her father. Both her and her father were looking for this mysterious Eon, and now she has the opportunity to finish that.
Now, what's a man gotta do to get that sort of attention from you?
If that's the sort of attention you want, Larson, you're well on your way.
Sounds like fun, but I'm only here to make an introduction. Lara Croft, meet Jacqueline Natla of Natla Technologies.
Good afternoon, Miss Croft. My research department has recently turned its focus to the study of ancient artifacts, and I'm led to believe that with the right incentive, you're just the woman to find them for me.
I'm afraid you've been misled. I only play for sport.
Which is precisely why I've come to you, Miss Croft. This is a game you've played before, with your father. You both spent years searching for the Scion of Atlantis. All you needed was the location of Qualopec's tomb.
You found Vilcabamba.
How quickly can you get to Peru?
The major difference as well for me is also that the first Tomb Raider, they set it a lot indoors, and the reason they did that was because they found it very difficult to animate outdoor sort of scenes. So now what you get in Tomb Raider Anniversary is you kind of get the outdoor sections tacked on. I mean, a very good example is the very first level, where instead of starting inside the mountain caves, you actually start outside it and actually have to make the entrance to the gate, which is done in the cutscene in the first game in '96. But really, anything else, not a major difference really, just mechanics really. You can swing on ropes, you can jump onto poles and things like that. And I really, really love that. I like the fact that there's very limited kind of dialogue. I don't play Tomb Raider really to have a kind of sense of empathy for Lara Croft at all. I play it purely for the levels and the puzzles. And the less kind of chatting about, the better for me. It's one of the reasons I didn't really like Tomb Raider Legend in comparison, was the amount of dialogue that was there. Just between these two levels, I think Tomb Raider Anniversary is just such a fantastic game because it's a brilliant nostalgic title. It really just goes back to this original. And as Pete, you mentioned, many people didn't like the original because there were lots of glitches and things, and they've completely gotten rid of that for Anniversary. And it's a very, very polished and very beautiful game, really, for those who love Tomb Raider.
You've got that experience, so it's really interesting to hear those points from you. I'd like to bring Sam into this as well, because I mean, one of the things we kind of discuss, as Chris was saying, it's very similar. There's not a lot of changes other than perhaps the physics of the engine. But as perhaps me and Pete were saying, that a lot of the changes brought into Anniversary is adding depth to the character of Lara and giving her a backstory, giving her something for the audience to empathise with. There's a certain moment in the game which probably does this perhaps more than any other, is a moment towards the end of the game where, for the first time, you see Lara, this is in a cutscene, you see Lara kill a relatively innocent man in cold blood to get what she wants.
Sorry, darling. This is the end of the line.
Just hand it over, Larson. This has nothing to do with you.
What's it got to do with you? The Scion belongs to Natla. Face it, you got no business here.
I don't have time for this. Get out of the way or you die.
What you gonna do, shoot me? Come on, Lara. I just work here. Now, I know how bad you want this, but I can't let you pass. And we both know you're not gonna kill me for it. That's just not who you are.
I'm not who you think I am. I
mean, this is quite a big diversion away from the Lara that we've known from the rest of the games. How did you react to this, Sam, when you were playing? How did you react to this flip of the character?
It's such a strange moment in the game because, in a strange way, it feels like a bit of guilt from Crystal Dynamics for taking you on this nearly 14-hour journey and not really giving you much in terms of character development, narrative, structure. Anniversary is still a game that lives by old game aesthetics. There's really no hand-holding at all other than the starting sort of tutorial. There's very limited instruction on where you got to go or what you got to do. Lara walks into a room and she knows what she has to do. She knows how to get from A to B and to solve the puzzle. It's up to you to work it out. She's not going to help you. So after doing that for about 14, 15 hours, to get this scene where you're pretty much an hour from the end of the game where Lara suddenly kills someone in cold blood, she, for me, became a lot more of the character that I think of today, and changed from that mercenary pick for hire or brush to someone who realised that maybe her father, maybe that her line of work is a lot more serious than she thought it was. And I'm stuck into believing whether this was a decision, because it's not in the original game, that this was Crystal Dynamics going, right, this is who we want Lara to be. This is where we are going to take her. She, when push comes to shove, she's a cold-blooded killer. She kills when she needs to get something that she wants, when she believes something else has an importance over the other. And I think it was very brave. I think it comes too late on in the game, but for me it really started to cement who I believe Lara is, and the kind of levels that she will go to get what she wants to rescue the situation. It's such a strange thing to happen in another respect, because she's not really sure either of what the situation is. Lara always deals with ifs, buts, mythology, legend, things that may or not be true. That's what an archaeologist does. They dig and they investigate until they find the truth. They never really know what they are looking for, essentially, and using the bits that they find, it's only when they look at things retrospectively that they can understand what it is that they're doing. So for her to do that so late on in the game, even then things really aren't set in stone that what is really going to happen. It's still quite a brave move from Lara, and I think that it begins to really affect her. I mean, is this something that her father was never really prepared to do? Is this something that really makes a difference between her and other sort of characters in games? Really, it was a moment that was shocking, but really affirmed to me who I thought Lara was.
You see, I really thought that the idea of what they were going for was completely awesome. I like the idea of this darker Lara. I think that the upcoming reboot is going to be something that I'm very, very interested in, because I like this complicated character, this person who's driven by, this insatiable desire to succeed, whether that's wealth or fame or fortune or whatever it is that pushes Lara along. I don't think we ever really know. That's fine. It's just that the timeline of that turnaround, of that moment, everything just seems like the team put it in as an afterthought. And when she's killed that, it's Larson, isn't it, that she kills?
Yeah.
When she kills Larson and she looks at her hands and basically thinks, who am I? What have I done? For me, that whole scene represented the development of the game and how the team must have felt. Like, she's a character who has a real sort of crisis about who she is and what she wants to be. And I think that the development team have that as well, in that they're not really sure what they want Tomb Raider to be. So when she's looking at her hands, I just saw God kind of in her place instead. Like, which direction do I take Lara? Am I going to continue to do these anniversary kind of things where I just remake the same game but for a modern audience? Or do I want to do something darker? Because when we did something darker, obviously he wasn't involved in this project, but when Lara was involved in storylines that were really sort of more brutal and a little bit more noir, the audience hated it and kind of shunned it, and we've all kind of forgotten about, Angel of Darkness. And it's just a really horrid moment. I think it rings really false that she's shown absolutely no mercy up until this point. She's killed animals that are supposedly possessed or controlled by evil or something like that, but she's murdered rare animal species. She's gone and plundered all these tombs. She's shot at human beings by this point, for Christ's sake. She's done all of this stuff. She seems like she has the energy and the will and the drive to do all of this stuff. But suddenly, some person who really hasn't done that much bad to her and is kind of not really interested in killing her, she just decides to cap. It's really hollow. And it gets to the point where, for me, that moment was, well, I literally don't care anymore. I the only thing that is interesting me on any level now is the design and the visuals and that sort of thing, because Anniversary did not need that. Or if they were going to do it, they needed to put that dead center. They needed to put that right at the start, because even in that opening cutscene where she sees her guide get ripped apart by whatever the hell they are, wolves, the amount of time that she cares about that person who has got her to the top of this fucking mountain and to this temple and helped her out and done all this sort of stuff, and no doubt, you can imagine, saved her life and shown her up the side of this rock face and helped her out and done all of this bloody stuff and died for her. The amount of time that she cares about him is infinitesimally smaller than killing somebody who arguably she has some small level of interest in killing. It's utterly bizarre, and it doesn't belong in this game at all.
No, I agree with you that it comes in the wrong place. It should come at the beginning, but I disagree that it has no place in the game at all, and it is indeed in any way bizarre. But before this moment, Lara doesn't deal with mortality in its most black and white sense. She's dealing with things that are already dead in a way that they are either Tyrannosaurus Rexes or they're mummies. These are things that have already died, and she's dealing with something that's in the past. Her whole life, up to the point where she kills Larson, is she's dealing with things that have been left with her and that have passed on and essentially dead and buried, or at least they should be. When she's raiding tombs, she's almost playing host to the party games, the parlor tricks of ancient civilizations. They're all booby-trapped and they're put into mind-bending puzzles because, yes, they don't want their secrets stolen, but also, just like a king would like a jester to perform for them, they would take glee in seeing someone being able to work out the puzzles that they've done, see someone be able to dodge all the traps that they've laid in the place of them. That's all dealing with the past. When it comes to Larson, that's suddenly a sort of a present event. There's no way that she can look at it retrospectively. There's no way that she can go, all right, how do I deal with this as a panther coming towards me? Do I shoot it? Can I get out of the way? She has that split second to think, now she's in the present, and she's got to decide, is getting this piece of the Scion more important than letting this man live?
Yeah, okay, but it's very difficult to... I see where you're coming from. Yeah, absolutely. But it's also very difficult to argue that point when she's mown down literally dozens of animals to get to the massive animals to get to this point. And
but they're not proper animals. They are put there to guard what she is trying to get. They exist as animals to guard, and therefore they've been waiting around for time.
Well, then what's Larson if not a guard for Natla?
Sorry, I just want to add, it's a question of objective there. There are three conflicting objectives, and we don't know which one she's going for. But the reason, her whole reason for this quest, is it the original game, a desire for money? Is it to complete what was unfinished with her father, or was it to save the world? And knowing which one of these gives us the impetus to kill Larson in cold blood or to dispatch these animals.
Now that is interesting.
But we don't know, and this is the problem they've got themselves in. She's got such a fractured biography that kind of keeps getting updated and changed, that we don't know why. We don't know anything really, because we don't know who to believe really.
I think it's interesting, the point that I think we all kind of agree that this specific point in the game doesn't quite sit right, but it's interesting we all kind of have different reasons why. Yes, she has killed a lot of, whether it be animals or certain enemies previously in the game, but the difference is between them and Larson is the fact that with all the others it's kind of like a survival thing. If you don't kill them, they will kill you. They are attacking you and you are defending yourself. With Larson, he's standing there with his hands in the air. He's not pointing a gun at you. It's not a case of shoot me or I'll shoot you, and there's something there. But what I found interesting is that for me, it was always kind of in a very similar way to we talk about Indiana Jones. It was for the artifact. It wasn't for money, and it was just for the fact of to preserve these artifacts and these relics. And so for her to flip and be very selfish in the fact that she's killed this man to get what she wants. That's no longer about preserving these relics and these ancient monuments. It's about getting what she wants, and she is willing to take a life to get what she wants.
I think it is very divisive, and it's interesting that scene does solidify why, in the mind of the player, why it is that she is there. And depending on whether or not you think she's doing it to save the world, or because she can, or for money, or for this artifact, or for her father, or whatever it is, that scene kind of, it can change your opinion on why she does something. And I guess the reason that I feel that it doesn't work in that situation, and why I feel that if they were going to do it, they should have done it earlier, is it didn't really change my mind. It didn't really change my mind as to why Lara was there. I didn't really see it as she was going there in a purely, I'm going to go and save the world and do all this sort of stuff, this sort of stuff. She was there because she wanted to, and she is driven by just the ability to do something and just to prove to herself that she can traverse an environment or beat a rival.
There's another strange bit. Again, after that scene happens, her hands seem to become the main focus. I mean, she looks at her hands again when she kills the guy with the low down shorts and the big guy with a knife, and then she does it again when Natla's speaking to her, and Natla says something about, this is who you've become now, Lara. It's, you are the things that you've done in your past. And Natla says something like, "You are no different to me now. You have killed, and that's it. That will change you."
Thousands of years I've waited for this moment. Do you realize what you've done? Blood on your hands. Do you believe it was spilled for the good of all man? For your own selfish desire. Look inside yourself, Lara. Your heart is as black as mine.
And when she's on the boat and the game's finished, she looks at her hands again and kind of smiles a little bit. And that for me felt more bizarre than the actual cold-blooded killing that she certainly started to do. Chris is absolutely right, and so is Dan. She kills all the animals at the start as self-defense, and I believe that those animals are kind of supernatural in the sense that they exist there to guard the artifact, and they're just part of the puzzle. They are part of the exploration, and they attack her, so she attacks back. But the fact that she looks at Hans and kind of smiles, and it's the same what Chris was saying. You don't know whether it's a smile of delight. You don't know whether it's a smile of, she's finally found out who she is and generally what she's capable of. You don't know whether it's a smile of, I finally finished my father's work and I understand who my father is. It's such a strange situation.
It's a very interesting metaphor, though, isn't it? Because at the end of Anniversary, she seems to understand, even if the audience doesn't, she seems to understand who she is.
Yeah.
And that is basically the entire game of Anniversary in terms of what Lara Croft is to the industry now. Like, it's very much an allegory for the team going, we understand what Lara Croft is, and now we know where we are going to take her adventures. And while that may not necessarily have been true, it's rather wonderful to kind of think about it on this extra level. You can almost see the designer's hand come in and sort of go, yeah, don't worry, fans. We know what we're doing with Lara. We're going to make this awesome, and we're going to go and do some interesting stuff. And obviously, the next game would be Underworld, the next true Tomb Raider game. And obviously, that goes in some odd directions itself. And I just think that Anniversary seems to, since it did come after Legend, since it did have this kind of, we are going to retell the story of Lara because people are kind of confused as to who she is, and then they continue it with Underworld, they make this trilogy, this very loosely collected trilogy, where you do have like a beginning, a middle, and ultimately a bit of an end. And Anniversary really is important in the pantheon of Tomb Raider games, because that defines the character for Legend. It informs Legend and it informs Underworld.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think for me, Tomb Raider Anniversary is kind of very loose and very simplified Metal Gear Solid 3 to the Metal Gear Solid series. I think that's what its intention was, because they've sown the seeds here. They've resurrected characters and brought them back so they become even more familiar in Underworld. I think Natla makes a return in Underworld as well. So kind of Anniversary is more than just a kind of a novelty piece. They are trying to inject it with something that's got more of an emotional heart to it, I think. I mean, I've got a quote here from Brian Horton, who's Senior Art Director of Crystal Dynamics. And he says that after crafting their biography, our goal was to make her as believable and relatable as possible. We wanted to make a girl that felt familiar, but still has a special quality about her. Something about the way her eyes look and the expression on her face makes you want to care for her. That was our number one goal. We wanted to have empathy for Lara, and at the same time show the inner strength that made clear she was going to become the hero.
So that's it for this episode. It is from here that we can really begin InRetroSpect. I will be back in a few weeks with the others to take a look at the series again and where we think it will go. In between that time, Pete, Chris and Sam will bring you their own thoughts on the impact, puzzles and adaptations of the Lara Croft universe. As always, we wholeheartedly welcome you to leave your comments on iTunes, the Zune Marketplace, and with our resident gremlin, who can be found on Twitter at InRetroSpect. So for the time being, stay tuned, maybe pick up a Tomb Raider or two, and enjoy the next few weeks of InRetroSpect.
Coming up next week on InRetroSpect, Pete looks at how Lara has changed the mainstream acceptance of games, the effect that she's had on mascots for home platforms, and also her sexuality.
With an added dimension to play around with, developers were starting to present more realistic characters, attempting to marry the extra layer of visual depth with character depth. While Lara's story is a simple one, her personality is multifaceted. Not only is she a wealthy adventurer driven to risk her own life in the pursuit of artifacts, she's quite clearly intimately aware of her body.
That's all to come next week on InRetroSpect.